Hey everybody, Sean here. Thought I'd do a quick video about something that I think can be easily misunderstood by people who otherwise mean well and often are working in the helping profession. And that is understanding how bullying can intersect with the idea of aggression versus assertive communication and the cultivation of a strong sense of self. So many of you know that I grew up in a family where domestic violence was the norm, right? My dad was a very violent guy, got kind of pleasure out of, messing with people and deceived a lot of people. And, he had some good traits too. But he did things on purpose to hurt people. And he did that as a pattern. He did it repeatedly across environments. That is not only bullying, but it's abuse, right? And there's a lot of different ways that someone can mistreat another person. His way of doing it was physical. Bullying is often a social form of abuse and an emotional form of abuse. Could also be verbal, right? And definitely it can be psychological or mental. And I'll get into those in a minute. But what I want you to know is that sometimes when people grow up in oppressive cultures, Maine is well known as a place where it's like #1 for domestic violence murders per population per capita. There's a lot of alcoholism and drug abuse here. I believe it might have something to do with the fact that Maine was, in some ways founded by Puritans fleeing from England for religious freedom, and maybe they were really uptight, and that just led to a lot of, child abuse or something. But they turned to all kinds of ways of dealing with things, but they weren't healthy. Because one of the things that happens now with people is that they tend to confuse assertiveness with aggressiveness. And I think that growing up in an abusive family, one of the things that can happen is that you can misconstrue passivity for adult maturity. And so I want you to understand, as a guy who's worked in the behavioral health field for over a decade and in substance abuse and substance use and addiction and alcoholism and with inmates and homeless people and kids at group homes and men that were convicted of domestic violence. Aggression is not the same thing as having a healthy sense of self. A healthy sense of self means that you don't let people push you around. And it's appropriate as part of having a healthy sense of self that you would set limits with others and that you would advocate for yourself. And sometimes you might be feeling upset emotionally by something that's actually wrong in your circumstances, right? Whether that's at home, at school, at church, or at work, wherever, on the playground. So if something's actually wrong and you're speaking up about it, and the guy that's listening to you is blowing you off, and you keep kind of asserting that there is a problem and that you would like to be heard, and you do it in a way that's respectful of self and others, that's not bullying. That's called being assertive. It's a way of communicating that demonstrates a love for self and for others, meaning that you don't want to hurt anyone or make anyone harmed in any way. You want for people to be built up on the inside and in the relationship, right? And that means you want to be heard and you want the other guy to hear you and you want to hear him and be known and know one another. So being passive is actually a sign of being stuck to those of us in the helping profession. Being passive means that you're not being assertive. that you're not demonstrating a strong sense of self. And that's like an identity that is not going to be easily pushed over or knocked down. So if you see your friends and peers and stuff being passive in a situation that really calls for assertiveness, assertive problem solving means that they face the problem head on. Assertive communication means that you talk about it as an adult with the other person in a way that's mutually respectful. But understand that if somebody is telling you how they feel and they're doing it in a way that is assertive, that's not the same thing as aggression. Aggression is when someone is attempting to harm you in some way. And you can see that advocating for self is a completely different thing than trying to dominate someone else's self through intimidation, right? So you have to be able to differentiate between intimidation and self-advocacy, which is a form of self-care, right? It's one of the ways that you demonstrate that you care about yourself. And the only way to love others is to love yourself as well, on a human level, right? The non-egotistical ego kind. So that's my only thought on that piece. Sometimes I see these things happening socially, and I think it's worth pointing them out, because if people at my level of experience and practice are not understanding those key points, then I imagine that everybody in day-to-day life that doesn't analyze behavior for a living probably might get that wrong as well. So if you have ever noticed this in your day-to-day life, feel free to comment below or add your 2 cents if you disagree or what you disagree about. Or post a passive-aggressive meme on your own page, and then it'll show up on my news feed, and I'll be able to tell that you didn't get the point. So hopefully if you understood this message, you'll be assertive and just say what you think rather than just passive-aggressively posting it on Facebook. Passive-aggressive means that you had some kind of underlying reaction or hostility to what was being said, but you didn't want to just come out and own it and discuss it with the other person. So it's not being assertive, right? So hopefully that will antagonize my audience a little bit to think on these things. And otherwise, I hope you have a great day and a great life.